We'll now move on to the next presentation. It's by Stephen.
Hello. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Hi, everyone. So I'm just going to share my screen. Should be this. And these slides are visible.
Yeah, they are.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to blur my background just in case. All right. So I guess I'll just jump right into it. Hello, everyone. Thank you for welcoming me to UNER today. My name is Stephen, and today I'll be presenting my research project and findings on interventions relating to student motivation in teams through the lens of self-efficacy theory. But first, why self-efficacy theory, and what is it? Based on early reviews of engineering education and specific psychology literature, self-efficacy seems to be a strong factor in influencing student motivation in university programs. Self-efficacy beliefs are thoughts and ideas people hold about their ability to achieve desired task outcomes. As you can imagine, this can influence behavior both positively and negatively. Bandura defines 4 main sources where self-efficacy beliefs are derived. Mastery experiences occur when successes build a robust belief in one's personal efficacy. Consequently, failures can undermine it. For example, being able to solve every single fluid mechanics problem in the problem set with ease makes it seem like you can solve any fluid mechanics problem. Self-efficacy theory postulates this to be the strongest influence in personal self-efficacy. Vicarious experience, otherwise known as social comparisons, are when people derive efficacy from comparing their ability to others. This is most common in contexts where people don't have much mastery experience to rely on. This is especially prevalent in an engineering classroom. If a student is struggling with a coding lab and confers with another student who already has coding experience from high school, this may negatively affect the former student's self-efficacy. Social persuasions are triggered by feedback given from others, words of encouragement, or advice from family and friends, for example. And finally, psychological states such as anxiety, stress, feelings of lack, or other emotions can have effects on individuals' self-efficacy beliefs. For example, if someone feels truly weakened and stressed by crunching Civ 100 calculations, their confidence in their chances of becoming a civil engineer might be depressed as a result. To fully understand the impact this research would have, it is important to realize how critical teamwork is to an engineering student's development. Earlier this year, Rice University published their findings on several years' worth of related research on engineering student team dynamics. The impact of the individual level is also discussed, and the quote on screen is representative of this. A main takeaway here is that students' teams explained a significant proportion of the development of their engineering belonging, self-efficacy, and career aspirations. Further, engineering education research from Purdue University in the early 2000s investigated the self-efficacy of first-year engineering students throughout the course of their design projects. This paper forms a connection between self-efficacy and team experiences. A key finding was that many students, both male and female, described positively influenced efficacy beliefs based on the discovery that they could work well in a team. Often, students refer to this as possessing teaming skills. Examples of student statements to this effect include, I think this class has honed my teaming skills, and I think I can do well in real-world teamwork. Now, emerging from this literature review, we can see 3 themes from a vital connection between self-efficacy and team experiences. First, task conflict can lead to relationship conflict, which depreciates team trust, psychological safety, and ultimately team performance. Second, early team experiences are critical to student success and pursuit in engineering industry. And lastly, students' engineering belonging and self-efficacy can be strengthened in positive design experiences, which could ultimately lead to higher levels of student motivation and academic success. Now that the theoretical basis has been established, it is important to clearly define the scope of this project and understand the role this work may play in the greater engineering education framework. The focus of this research is to answer the following question: how can teaching staff better foster a pedagogical environment that effectively supports teams and promotes motivation towards teamwork? The impact of this is relatively straightforward. By implementing interventions that remediate gaps in course design that cause students turmoil, will have a positive impact on the student's experience in that course. As noted earlier, improving these early engineering design experiences is critical to promoting students' engineering belonging and career aspirations in engineering. Furthermore, student self-efficacy is greatly strengthened once they can feel they can work well in a team. Affecting this aspect of the student experience may have a positive butterfly effect in their educational journeys. And to achieve my research goals, I followed the process depicted on the slide. Beginning with a review of foundational psychology and engineering education research, then conducting informal interviews to develop an understanding of course structure and common complaints here at U of T. From here, assessing complaints to derive gaps in the course structure, and finally, identifying methods to remediate said gaps. Here, I'll present the interventions that are both existing and novel that support the unlocking of student motivation. And so after conducting informal interviews with second-year students on their experiences from first year in ESP and Praxis, I was able to identify 7 core similarities in course design, common complaints, and gaps for remediation. Once we have realized these course gaps, it then begs the question, how can these be remediated to improve the first-year design experiences? How can we motivate students to perform in their teams when these gaps exist? This is a critical step in my research process because it will help inform the appropriate interventions to be considered by teaching staff. I've aggregated a list of 10 interventions necessary to close the gaps derived from these interviews. All these have been validated by select interviewees for redundancy and degree of value add. These interventions were sourced from a combination of literature, interviews, and personal experience. I will not go very deep into detail, but on this slide, we have 5 interventions that are currently in place. Some of these are more robust than others, but they can always benefit from constant improvement. The interventions include structuring courses to ensure students have dedicated time for teaming, preparing TAs to ensure teams feel supported technically and during team storming, providing best practice documents for deliverables, consistent expectations amongst teaching staff, and ensuring the first deliverable of every team project is always focused on organizing the team and scoping the project. Next, we have the novel interventions that are not currently present in the first-year design courses. These include adopting a formal course policy to support teams with hitchhiking team members, frequently checking in to diagnose pain points, assess team dynamics, and identify hitchhikers. Producing guides that help guide students on producing better safeguards to team conflict, introducing the concept of team mindfulness and building it into tutorials, and taking on a nurturing teaching approach to guide students along their projects. Although these interventions seem promising to close gaps and remediate pain points for students, I'll focus on one of these interventions because of its novelty in the engineering education space and my impression from personal teamwork experience with it. This one being number 9, team mindfulness. Based on research out of UBC and the University of Minnesota, team mindfulness seems to be a promising intervention to reduce team conflict and its ill effects. But what is team mindfulness? Team mindfulness is defined as a shared belief among team members that team interactions are characterized by awareness and attention to present events, and by experiential, non-judgmental processing of team experiences. This is not to be confused with individual mindfulness, which currently carries many definitions depending on the way it is viewed and by whom. The main difference between the two is that individual mindfulness is interpersonal. It has been considered a trait, state, or practice. Similar to other psychological constructs such as personality or efficacy, mindfulness cannot be directly observed, but it must be inferred from behaviors. Team mindfulness is a team-level property, not an aggregation of individual mindfulness. It is an emergent shared cognitive state that is developed through experience in a team. And according to this study, team mindfulness seems to be a promising property to reduce team conflict in moderating the task conflict, relationship conflict connection, suggesting that teams taught mindfulness may have fewer negative interpersonal processes. The paper's goal is to understand team mindfulness and its role in conflict transformation and social undermining. The purpose of this study, however, wasn't to test an intervention, but to collect data on this novel concept and understand the implications it may have in the conflict transformation process. On screen is a high-level concept map to illustrate this process. One of the hypotheses of this research was to confirm that team mindfulness moderates the relationship between task conflict and individual social undermining via the relationship conflict. Essentially, when team mindfulness is high, the conflict transformation process is impaired, and the results speak for itself. The charts on screen prove one of the hypotheses of these papers. By doing so, teams would be more well equipped to navigate conflict, establish stronger levels of team trust, build psychological safety, ultimately leading to more positive team experiences overall. Now, bringing this back, what could be the next steps? How could this research be continued to develop and achieve the goals set out by this project to maximize the impacts of this research? In the future, it would be interesting to explore a potential intervention for engineering design with team mindfulness. To do this, an intervention must first be designed to incorporate team mindfulness into the first year FACE engineering design courses. Then the intervention would be piloted with a few volunteer teams. And finally, we would assess the efficacy of the teams that have incorporated team mindfulness. It would be interesting to assess the team mindfulness to find a correlation between self-efficacy and performance. In summary, early team experiences are critical for first-year engineering students to develop their senses of self-efficacy. Pedagogical interventions are vital to support the development of strong and mindful teams that are cohesive and high-functioning. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that the funding for this project was provided from the Dean Strategic Fund, number 1926. And I would also like to acknowledge Dr. Patricia Sheridan for her invaluable input and feedback on this research project. Further, her summer research assistants, Kate Whalen, Julia Natai, Ellie Gresho, Allison Foote were critical in developing and validating this material. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I would now like to open the floor up to questions.
Thank you, Stephen. Any questions? Okay, Ravi Raj, go ahead.
Thank you, Stephen. Very interesting. You picked on team mindfulness. Was it your feeling that of the 5 interventions that you had suggested for the future, this was the most important, or why did you pick this particular one? Do you think it's the most impactful here?
So I picked it because it was very unconventional. I'd never seen anything like this before, and I realized that it has such an important connection to that task conflict relationship conflict connection. And that has been noted by some papers in other universities that when task conflict is low and relationship conflict is high, that is a situation that depreciates very important qualities to teams, such as psychological safety and team trust. And so moderating that relationship would form an ideal space for teams to ensure that they don't fall into those kinds of situations where they might be in uncomfortable situations that make that team experience less of a beneficial one.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Any more questions from
If
the
there
judges?
if there aren't any, if nobody else is asking a question, maybe I could ask you to address the question that's been posted to the chat, which I also had, is how does this change in an online environment?
Oh, I see. Oh, sorry, my mistake. Sorry about that. But so the
not at all. Yeah,
that is actually a great question. The impact online would be interesting because there is similar research being done by iLead now about how to foster psychological safety in an online classroom, and this has been work led by Alison Olejowski. And it's interesting because it's an intervention in the sense that it's introducing teams in a new way, whether it be asking to share if they're comfortable a personal factor or something about their weekend or something that's comfortable to them. And now that's one approach to foster psychological safety. So to foster team mindfulness, it could be a different question relating to maybe sharing a mindful moment that they had, getting them to reflect on a nice thing that happened to them, or that becoming more aware of might change their perspective on. So I think it's similar to that approach, and it can be very valuable in online settings because of that. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Stephen. Is there any more questions for Stephen? Okay, thank you very much.